this Ayatollah t-shirt? Khomeini died years ago.
But Mark, it works on any Ayatollah. Ayatollah Nakhbada, Ayatollah Zahedi. Even as we speak, Ayatollah Razmara and his cadre of fanatics are consolidating their power.
I don't care who's consolidating their power.
She doesn't care who's consolidating their power. But we should get back to the Simpsons and ask them what they think about, well, the possibility, at least, of President Trump dropping bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities. The topic of some discussion in our nation's capital overnight. You know, the scuttlebutt was everywhere that, stay tuned, last night, President Trump is going to drop bombs. B-2 bombers are going to fly out of White Man Air Force Base in Missouri, fly nonstop, refueling in flight repeatedly to drop some 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs onto Fordow and maybe Natanz, but Fordow for sure, these Iranian nuclear facilities. It did not happen yet. There is an aircraft carrier battle group in place. The USS Carl Vinson is the aircraft carrier, surrounded by a phalanx of United States naval ships capable of firing all kinds of missiles, cruise missiles, and all kinds of good stuff. And a lot of back and forth on this. Did you see the Tucker Carlson, I think it would be fair to say, versus Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz? I like them both very much. They had a lively back and forth on the subject, and I will share that with you, and I have some thoughts myself when it comes to the U.S. entering the fray here in the war between Israel and Iran, having to do only with nuclear weapons in the hands of radical Islamic jihadis, the Ayatollahs, fueled and funded by Barack Hussein Obama and the Democrat Party. Lunch bucket Joe Biden was allegedly vice president at the time, although he may not have known it. And I've got a lot to say about all that war, peace, mayhem, and I've actually been inside of a B-2 bomber and at Whiteman Air Force Base, and I've been up in refueling tankers, refueling airplanes, up in the air when B-2 bombers came up to refuel in flight, and I was down in the bay where beneath the plane, in the belly of the plane, where the man in charge of controlling the boom that refuels the B-2 bombers. I'll get into all that. And this morning I was marveling at a number of Democrat Party things because they provide me with way too much stuff, I've got to say. Lots and lots of crazy stuff. Like in Washington, D.C., where the radical left-wing Democrat mayor is now announcing, we're going to have an expanded juvenile curfew because of what they are referring to as youth violence. Youth violence. That's violence being perpetrated by their kids. You know, the problem is not our guns, it's their sons. And that is the problem. But the left-wing radical mayor in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, Democrat, Muriel Bowser, Bowser. She was one of the singers in Sha Na Na. She was the guy that rolled up the sleeves on the white T-shirt. I think that was her. Mayor Muriel Bowser is proposing an expansion of D.C.'s juvenile curfew to address youth violence during the summer months. You know, they much prefer violence in the spring and the fall and even the wintertime, but not the summer so much. So they might have to start restricting the violence just in the summertime, you know, and then maybe, raise your kids. Oh, sorry, too late for that. So announced her intention to submit an emergency legislation plan to the D.C. City Council filled with mental cases and most of them dwarves suffering from intellectual dwarfism that would extend the current curfew to include all minors under the age of 18. That is to say, it would include 17-year-olds, but if you're 18 years old, the curfew doesn't apply to you. Everybody under 18, the curfew would apply to them because of all the shootings and the robberies and the theft and the smash and grabs, because Democrats raise criminals. And what was the ratio in Washington, D.C. on Election Day last time around? The Democrats voted 96% 7% or something for Kamala Harris, and before that for Joe Biden, and before that for Mao Zedong, I think it was. So new legislation, all minors under the age of 18. The measure would apply from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., 7 days a week. No days off there. You don't get Tuesday night or Sunday night or anything like that. Through June, July, and August. Here she comes. It's a big curfew. And our mayor, she's out there talking about it, and she's a Democrat, so she knows what she's doing. She knows crime.
We have seen some concerning trends with how our young people are socializing. Those changes in behavior
shooting
also require us to change our posture.
Got to change our posture. And then she suddenly stood up straight. And then amazing. Now, I was marveling at this because in Los Angeles they have an idiot Democrat mayor too, but I'll get to that in a moment before we get to dropping bunker busters on Iranian nuclear facilities. But here's my mayor. I didn't vote for, of course, although I did vote for Marion Barry back when I had the opportunity. He was a lot more fun to vote for, I've got to say. I voted for him every chance I got. He set back statehood by decades all by himself. But he did smoke crack with Hunter Biden in Georgetown. So keep that in mind because Democrats, you know they are. Mayor Muriel Bowser.
We know that young people want to be around one another.
That's they want to be
how
around.
Teenagers are.
That's how they are.
That's the nature of teenagers.
Not other
Some
people.
of them are breaking the law, however.
Have you noticed
others
that?
of them
noticed
are
that.
doing menacing behaviors and activities around the city.
Yeah, because activities around the city. She's talking about, there are like 950 carjackings, I think, in the District of Columbia. Small city, only 700,000 people. Tehran, for example, 9.5 million people. Washington, D.C., about 700,000 people. Mayor Muriel Bowser.
MPD has been flexible and resourced enough to adjust their posture, often weekend by weekend, night by night. But we need and we will work together with our entire community to change the negative behaviors that we're seeing from some of our young people.
Negative behaviors. You're raising a passel of criminals who, burn and loot and shoot. And did she say, what was the word that she used? Flexible? She wants to be flexible? Is that
MPD has been flexible.
Flexible. Is that like being black and flexible at the same time? Flexible? You've heard of Blexit. I've heard of Blexit, black people leaving the Democrat Party, exiting the Democrat Party. That's Blexit. So flexible must be black people being flexible.
MPD has been flexible.
I'm reminded of Simone Biles when I think about that. She's flexible, I think. Don't you think? So I heard that, and so now hopefully that will cut down on crime. I heard Virginia Attorney General, the great Jason Miyares, being interviewed this morning on the WML radio in Washington, D.C., on my friend Larry O'Connor's excellent radio broadcast. And he's talking about how he has been able to reduce the number of homicides very, very significantly in the state by targeting high crime areas with law enforcement. Wow. Why didn't I think of that? And isn't that crazy? And reducing very dramatically the number of fatal drug overdoses in Virginia, the Commonwealth. And the Democrats, they're running a left-wing radical who will lead to, if he were to be elected by idiot Democrats, then the number of homicides would skyrocket under this radical left-wing Democrat. And the number of fatal drug overdoses would skyrocket, and then the Democrats would blame somebody else. And they'd be very angry about it, and they might have to burn down a Jew's house or something like that because that's who the Democrats are. Now to Los Angeles, California, where the New York Times is very excited. Mayor Karen Bass, another radical left-wing Democrat racist who hates America and elected by Democrats. Mayor Karen Bass lifts curfew in downtown L.A. It's only downtown. It's not where they live, not where all the rich Democrats live, just downtown LA. They got a curfew there. And KTLA in Los Angeles, immigration protest curfew. That's what they're calling it there, an immigration protest curfew. Lifted in downtown Los Angeles. Now, I thought this was pretty funny yesterday because Mayor Karen Bass, they announced yesterday afternoon, was going to lift the downtown LA curfew that was put in place to quell protest violence. They say protest violence. And you know what? It worked. And she said, wait a minute, we put this curfew in place and the violence has plummeted. Let's get rid of that curfew because we need to restore the violence levels that existed previous to the curfew. Let's make sure that whatever we do leads to more violence, lots more violence. So that's what Democrat Karen Bass is doing there. She's an extremist. She was a member of the House of Representatives, and then she said, I think I'd rather be mayor of L.A. I can, think globally but wreck locally. And that's what the left is doing now, firebombing the world, starting with our country, and then they'll move on because they're the left. The LAist, Mayor Karen Bass, has lifted the curfew for downtown Los Angeles 7 days after it was imposed in response to the violence and vandalism that broke out after demonstrations to protest immigration enforcement sweeps. So law enforcement was enforcing the law, and the Democrat Party decided that mob violence, Visigoth style, was the appropriate response, and so they attacked violently. And they have elected officials attacking law enforcement all over the place. The move comes 1 day after Bass shortened the overnight curfew by 2 hours. That ought to do it. So that's good. And the curfew effect, well, officials said that the curfew was effective in curbing violence and vandalism. And that's why they had to get rid of it. So you say, you know what? Hey, wait, in 7 days, look at this, it's almost overnight. It's been effective curbing violence and vandalism. So the Democrat mayor said, let's get rid of that curfew. It works. We don't do anything that works, not in a positive way. It's been a challenge for bars and restaurants, this writing says, which have had to reduce hours because the curfew, you see. And Savannah Parsons, shift leader at Yaku's Kitchen, told LAS that moving forward, I'm sure we'll be opening till regular hours again. That's good. But what they discovered was that their curfew was very effective in curbing violence and vandalism. And so as soon as they discovered that, they had to put an end to the curfew in order to restore violence and vandalism to Los Angeles, because the Democrat Party is a violent party. And speaking of the violent Democrat Party, it was the Obama-Biden administration that fueled Iran's nuclear weapons program, allowing them under the JCPOS, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Beep, and the Democrats, they sat down with Iran and they said, oh, sure, you can spin centrifuges in secret underground facilities that are bomb-proof. You can enrich uranium to a level that is only necessary for the construction of nuclear weapons, which you have already promised to use against Israel and the Jewish people, which you've promised to wipe off the face of the earth from the river to the sea. But the Democrats chant from the river to the sea in the United States now, especially at Ivy League campuses, but not exclusively on Ivy League campuses. And the Democrats there, they should be wearing armbands and goose-stepping everywhere they go, given that they firebombed the Jewish Pennsylvania governor's mansion with the governor inside with his family during Passover, shortly after a Seder dinner. But never mind that. The Democrats, they're not the good guys. Oh, yeah, the Egyptian that Joe Biden and the Democrats waved into the country, and his expired visa was no problem with Joe Biden and the Democrats. And the Egyptian that attacked the Jewish march, the pro-Israel march in Boulder, Colorado, and he set fire to an 88-year-old Holocaust survivor. He did that in Colorado. The news media decided that wasn't a big story. He's due in court today. The Egyptian is due in court today. I assume the Democrats will be outside cheering him like they were yesterday with that murder lady in Massachusetts, like they are outside when Luigi Mangione ever appears. They love murder, and they love murderers because they're the Democrat Party. Aren't they amazing? Hey, and wait a minute, this curfew worked. It reduced crime and vandalism, so let's get rid of the curfew. All right, now look, I've got a lot to say. President Trump and the stories that he may be on the precipice of entering militarily the war between Israel and Iran, and the rhetoric has dialed up, of course, from the troglodytes and some of President Trump's colorful rhetoric, too. I'm getting texts about this from people that don't normally pay attention to politics and all this Washington stuff, saying, hey, is President Trump really going to drop bombs on Iran and get into this militarily? Didn't he say he wouldn't get us entangled in far-off, never-ending wars? Well, I've got all that coming up, and some thoughts, some opinions, and some sound bites for you. We are at 888-630-9625. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris. Now, Ilhan Omar, I was playing some Ilhan Omar. She's a radical. She's pro-Iran and anti-American. She's an Islamist, and she's closer to being a terrorist than a patriotic American, which makes her perfect for the Democrat House of Representatives. They're breathtaking, these people. And today is Mailbag Day. Today is Mailbag Day here on the Chris Plante Show, which, you know what that means? It's Hump Day in the Clinton household. And Hillary Clinton wakes up once again face down in a pool of her own dried vomit on one of the many large, expensive linoleum kitchen floors she has in their large mansions, whichever multi-million-dollar mansion she wakes up in, face down in a pool of her own dried vomit with an empty 1-gallon cardboard box of cheap New Zealand Chardonnay next to her as the Secret Service shakes their heads, knuckles on their hips. Oh, so sad, what might have been, but never will be. Ha, 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 ha. Hillary Clinton. What a tragic story she is, isn't she? And Bill Clinton, he gets the house to himself because the Energizer might come over, whoever it is now. And the Secret Service knows it, wink and a nod. They're not there to narc him out. They're there to provide protection, you know. But never mind that. And that also means that here on the Chris Plante Show, what does that mean? Means it's Mailbag Day. Mailbag Day. That's right. And I've got, I just give you a little clue on the mailbag. Have you ever been to a Diddy freak-off? Have you ever been to a Diddy, you know, like P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, a freak-off? Ever been? So I just want to scratch the surface on the mailbag because that's one of the questions for today. And I have more right here in my hand because it's Mailbag Day. Mailbag Day. It's not Mailbag Day in Iran, though. It's very different in Iran. And President Trump and the Ayatollah, not the one of rock and rolla, but the other one, having a lively back and forth, a very expressive verbal back and forth. And where do you hear this back and forth, speaking of back and forth, between the great Senator Ted Cruz and the great Tucker Carlson, a back and forth, not on the same side of this. The idea of dropping big bombs on Iranian nuclear facilities, that is coming up. All right, so dropping bombs on Muslims, you know, Iranians, terrorists, you know the type. And I've got a lot of that for you, and I want to start sharing because I always collect lots and lots of audio sound bites to share with you, and sometimes I don't get to them all. And Michael's rolling his eyes at me because he spends a lot of time collecting these audio sound bites, and then I just start talking, and you know how this goes. All right, let's get to, because these Iranians, let's start with this. They're radical Islamic terrorists, and that from the biggest leader in the country, the Ayatollah Khamenei. Pardon me, you get any on you? Anytime you pronounce the Khamenei, you should maybe put up a shield of some kind, a splash shield like you find at a salad bar, that kind of thing. I wonder if they invented the splash shield at a salad bar, given all the words in Farsi where you have to say khem, like, oh, pardon me. Look out for that. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. So we got that. And now, again, last night I was at Newsmax yesterday afternoon, and we were talking about Iran and what might happen. We were saying yesterday, well, tonight, you know, the bombs could be dropping. And one of the things I said when we were discussing it was, I said, I'm not so sure. I think maybe this is President Trump and the art of the deal, the international art of the deal, or the art of the international deal, whichever you may prefer. And as this President Trump negotiating, he's trying to get Iran to come to the table. And now he's calling on Iran to surrender unconditionally, like Japan in 1945, And President Trump is a no-nonsense guy. He's not kidding. And when he says something, you should take it seriously and take him at his word. Now, at the same time, he might be rattling the saber a bit. And President Trump has his own social media platform called Truth. He wrote on Truth, and this actually was night before last now. He wrote, Iran should have signed the deal. He put the word deal in quotation marks. I told them to sign. Should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, now in all caps, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Now, that is kind of, I saw that, and I've got to say I laughed when I saw that night before last. I said, well, Tehran is a city of 9.5 million people. If you include the surrounding population, densely populated area, we're talking about 14 million people. That's a lot of people, 14 million people. And the truth is, some people started evacuating. The highways were thick with cars with their headlights on in the dark. And say, oh, look, people are evacuating Tehran. Now, I don't think that we, the United States, are looking at dropping anything in the city of Tehran bomb-wise. Israel is, they've got selected targets in Tehran. President Trump also said that we, the United States, we know exactly where the supreme leader is. That's actually, interestingly, that's my title around the radio station here. And a supreme leader. The kind of a little dictatorial, but I like it. And the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, pardon me again, and said, well, we know where he is, so we could drop a bomb on his kufi, on his turban, and he'd be gone. And Israel knows where he is, too. And Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, spoke to President Trump several days ago now, said, hey, we know where the Ayatollah is. Should we put the zap on him? And President Trump said, no, don't do that. I'm still trying to cut a deal with these clowns. And after we take out Fordow, this nuclear facility, which I am thinking, I don't want to say I'm concerned but I'm thinking that President Trump may have his eye on this Fordow nuclear facility built deep underground, and we have 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs that could be dropped from B-2 stealth bombers that would blow it up real good. I believe each of these B-2 stealth bombers can carry 2 of the giant 30,000-pound bombs, which I believe are made in Florida at an Air Force base there, but that's not important now. And the B-2 bombers would fly nonstop from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, where I have been, not for quite some time, to visit B-2 bombers and to climb into the cockpit of a B-2 bomber. The bomber I got into was the Spirit of Texas. The B-2 bomber is called the Spirit, that's its name. And we've got, I think we built 22 of them, and each of them has the name of a state on them because of politics, largely, and funding. But never mind that. And the B-2 bombers could leave, fly, refuel in flight. And again, I've been up in refueling tankers. I think it was a KC-135, which is a Boeing 707. As B-2, while airborne, B-2 bombers come up and you refuel the B-2 bombers in flight. And then they peel off as you fly along steadily in your KC-135. And that was a fun day at work, I've got to say. And down on the ground in the hangars, the climate-controlled hangars at Whiteman Air Force Base, up to a B-2 bomber, where there are signs around the B-2 bomber, that say, deadly force authorized, no trespassing. And if you start running, you're a liberal, and you start running at the B-2 bomber, they'll shoot you and kill you, which, is a reasonable thing to do under the circumstances. But in any case, President Trump said, Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame, waste of human life. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. That made me laugh. And then President Trump also tweeted, we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He put supreme leader in quotation marks. He's an easy target, but is safe there where he is now because we know where he is. This is psychological warfare designed to freak him out. We're not going to take him out, and then in parentheses, kill with an exclamation mark. At least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I like that. It's like it's an announcement aboard your airplane, like you're on United Airlines. Thank you for your attention to this matter. TSA announcement. And the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. I got to say, yesterday I was driving in Washington, D.C. What time was it? About 5:30. And I was cut off by it was a motorcade, of course, which happens in Washington. But I believe that it was J.D. Vance that drove by in the motorcade. It's almost not quite a presidential motorcade, but it's pretty big. And I believe it's J.D. Vance drove by. I had to stop, and that's okay. And then the motorcade went by, and then I had to go through a red light because it's D.C. And now they'll mail me a ticket. They'll mail me a ticket for that. I got one of those 2 days ago. For speeding by the Russian embassy again. I don't want to stay there. Too many Russians, too many communists. But in any case, J.D. Vance, whose motorcade I was stopped in traffic by yesterday, the perils of living in Washington. J.D. Vance tweeted, or on Truth Social, said, I wanted to address some things directly on the Iran issue, said J.D. Vance. First, POTUS, the President of the United States, has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Second, I've seen a lot of confusion over the issue of civilian nuclear power and uranium enrichment. These are distinct issues, he said, and that's a fact. Iran could have civilian nuclear power without enrichment, but Iran rejected that. And, of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglements after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. Now, that's a shot taken at Republicans and Democrats, and fairly so, I've got to say. But J.D. Vance, people are, of course, right to be worried about foreign entanglements, and President Trump has been quite clear about not wanting to become involved in stupid foreign military entanglements that go on forever and ever. In fact, we've got a couple of sound bites. Where are those sound bites, Michael? They're in our sound bite list of sound bites, I think, aren't they, today? And President Trump has said a number of things. Then I want to get to Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz with their back and forth yesterday. But President Trump has been perfectly clear, I think, October 18th of 2020. This is he's running this is when Joe Biden won with communist Chinese interference with printing up tens of thousands of driver's licenses to get people to vote mail-in, using mail-in ballots. And then you may be aware that President Trump in 2020 won the in-person vote in all 50 states. And amazingly, Joe Biden won the mail-in ballot vote in all 50 states. That's kind of coincidental. But during that campaign, October 18th of 2020, President Trump, I thought, made himself pretty clear.
We will keep America out of endless, ridiculous foreign wars of places you've never even heard of. We will maintain America's unrivaled military might, and we will ensure peace through strength.
And then, that seems pretty clear, and the crowd loved it, and I think America loved it, and enough of all that stuff, especially with, the Arab world and the Islamic world. Iran is, of course, not the Arab world. It's Persia. They're not ethnic Arabs. And interesting stuff. Then President Trump, October of last year, when he is running for president for the third time, which doesn't happen every day, about October of last year, President Trump.
When I return to the White House, I will stop the wild and wasteful spending of this administration. I will end the endless wars. They never stop. Again, we had no wars. We had no new wars under your favorite president, President Trump. We had no new wars. They thought I was going to start a war. Let me tell you something. I'm going to stop World War III because we're closer to World War III than we've ever been since the end of World War II.
I'm going to stop World War III. Now that becomes, I had to say, from the Situation Room in the White House to the War Room. I like to call it the War Room in the Pentagon, beneath the Pentagon, under the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting. I'd love to be in on these conversations because the question becomes, how do you stop World War III? By not bombing Iran's nuclear facility or by bombing Iran's nuclear facility? Which course of action is more likely to avert World War III, if you want to call it that? We're kind of in the middle of World War III and have been for 20-something years. And you might even say the Cold War was World War III, and then the Islamic Wars, World War IV. But that's not important now. President Trump this year in April with the Italian Prime Minister, who's a ton of fun, Giorgia Meloni, the one who went and got Joe Biden when he wandered off talking to the paratrooper. And she's like, hey, come over here. There's an international meeting going on. See if you can join us.
I know the Iranian people. They're incredible people. Always have been very smart, very energetic, very successful people. And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody. I really don't. But Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's, pretty simple. It's really simple.
But Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's simple. It's really simple. I agree with that. I think if Iran has nuclear weapons, very different than even North Korea having nuclear weapons. Radical Islamic jihadi terrorists that blow up any hostages. They're born of a crime in 1979. The religious fanaticism is a death cult, and a death cult with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, including potentially intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. That would change the geometry of the world. The political and military geometry of the world would change overnight. I just snapped my fingers next. It'd be changed like that. All right, let's grab a phone call, Michael, before we get out. I'm going to take you to Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz with a back and forth that was not a happy back and forth on this subject. Let's go to Robert calling from South Carolina. Robert, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Love your show. Long-time listener. First-time caller, I believe. Hey, listen.
Thank you.
So Congress approved the Lend-Lease Act for Ukraine. Why can't we get them to approve that for Israel and just lend them a couple of B-2 bombers? Then we're out of it, right? What do you think?
It's a fun question, except B-2 bombers are a very specialized aircraft. They can't just land anywhere, and you need specific ground maintenance capability. And the pilots, it's a $2 billion airplane, so you don't want to just let any of your pals fly it around and drop bombs. A lot of specialized training. But I like that, Chris. I like your thinking, though. And if we could give them the 30,000-pound bunker busters, and if they could drop them from F-15s or something, then done deal. But you can't do that. I do like your Lend-Lease thinking, though.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you, buddy. And listen, I know I understand what you're saying. And that's a big conversation. I promise you at the Pentagon and at Whiteman Air Force Base, where these guys who would be flying the mission are thinking, well, Israel's doing a good job of bombing the important targets. Why don't we let them take this for us? And then the question becomes, can they? Are they in a position to do that? And again, I'm not in that lane anymore, but I'd have to ask a lot of questions. I don't think that we could train them up and say, take our $2 billion B-2 stealth bomber, and you're going to need 2 of them for this mission, and each of them dropping 2 bunker buster bombs, 30,000-pound bombs, the maximum yield from these conventional bombs. But there's a lot more to say about this. And listen, Robert, I appreciate your question fully. And I want you to listen to Senator Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson, the lively back and forth they had on this subject. And then I've got some ideas of my own. All right, I look forward to sharing with you the Tucker Carlson back and forth with Senator Ted Cruz. Two people deserving of respect, and back and forth on bomb Iran, as Senator John McCain once said long ago. In the meantime, in between time, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Fayed. Fayed calling from Tampa, Florida. Fayed, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Because I come originally from Egypt, when you say this guy, Muhammad from Egypt, he's the Egyptian terrorist, it's really not that way. He's not a terrorist because he's an Egyptian. He's a terrorist because he adopted to a culture, to an ideology, but nobody knows when it will kick in. It doesn't matter if he's coming from Egypt, from Iran, from even born in the United States. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm nodding. I'm nodding in agreement with you.
Yeah. So this is the problem that the Americans or the whole West suffers from is you keep hosting people. You don't know when they will turn against you. Themselves, even, they don't know when they will turn against you.
Well, that's true. That's true. Now, this guy, of course, problem. You're from Egypt, Fayed, so you know that the Muslim Brotherhood has been banned in Egypt. But this guy adopted the Muslim Brotherhood ethos, and that's where things went bad, right?
Exactly. He wants. He's a family guy. He has 5 children, a wife. He was working in Kuwait. That hardworking person. But then when the thing triggers into him, this is when the change happens.
Well, that may very well be. I'd say maybe his family should look at being deported too.